Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to the Accursed. And today we spend time speaking about the Outcasts, one of my favourite lineages in Curseborne. Because the Outcasts are one of those things I truly love about horror. They are neither one thing nor the other. They occupy that interstitial place which is so prevalent in Curseborne, liminal space. Oh, well, once upon a time, for some of them, this was their native habitat. Now they have been cast out from it. An outcast can be somewhere between angel and devil. An outcast can be somewhere between fey and mortal. An outcast can be something alien that wishes to be human, or something that was human that experimented a little too far and became alien. They are outsiders, but even the outsiders don't want them. So they are outcast. There is something I find very thrilling, intriguing about playing characters like that, about telling stories about characters like that. And for me, this is why the lineage is one of my favourites. Now, within the lineage, you have your families, of course. The Battleground Angels, by the name alone, you can tell that's the clue. They are angelic in nature and in purpose. You have the Munificence and the League of the Hidden Crossroads on different ends of the temptation spectrum. They're both tempters, but their target audience and their methods are very different. You have the Chimerae, or Chimerae if you prefer, mortals who delved a little too deeply into dark magics and found themselves irrevocably changed. The Keepers of the Broken Vine, meanwhile, utterly inhuman and wanting to make Earth a new kind of heaven. And then the Nephilim. For me, probably the most mysterious and intriguing outcast family of all, but that's to my tastes. A very disturbed history to the Nephilim that I hope we get to delve a little more deeply into at some point. Now, this isn't one of my guides to the Accursed where we focus in on the families in detail. What we're looking at here is damnation, because just like all Accursed, the outcasts are damned. And they are damned not only to be on the outside in perpetuity, but also, well, to occasionally give others hints of their outsider nature. Let's work our way through the manuscript, the revised manuscript, and talk about mechanically how those outcasts work. See, first of all, you have what it is to be an outcast. Outcasts are broken mirrors. They are walking liminalities. They are hidden within a human guise, but they are most certainly not human. This liminal aspect of themselves, they can peek out in opportune moments, but sometimes they can use it as a weapon. Typically, it's when their damnation mechanically comes into play. They cannot help but tear off the mask, or it just simply disintegrates and reveals to the world what you truly are. But before that happens, you can slip off the mask. Slipping off the mask is a very important tool in the arsenal that the outcasts can bring to bear. You see, by all appearances, they're human. They may be a little uncanny at times, they may be a little unsettling, but as far as the majority of the world are concerned, they are the everyday mortals that the majority of people around you happen to be. But they can peer into hidden spaces that humans cannot perceive, and of course they manifest as them as well. They can keep those manifestations hidden for as long as they have control of their curse, but sometimes they want to unleash that liminal side. In order to do so, mechanically, they bleed one curse die, as by now, with these damnation videos, you'll be aware that the vast majority of special abilities that our accursed have come into effect when you bleed a curse die. Bleed a curse die, you can do this. And for the rest of the scene, you gain the following. You can describe your outcast's semi-liminal appearance. So this is a semi-liminal appearance. Keep that in mind. There is semi-liminal and there is liminal. This is how they are perceived after slipping off the mask and will remain in their perceived form unless something alters it. This is not their most mind-bending, world-altering state. That's fully liminal. That only becomes apparent when the character suffers from their damnation. They will gain one automatic hit applied to influence actions against anyone who sees the liminal outcast in this scene. So whether it's be not afraid, whether it's be afraid, whatever it is they're trying to do with their influence, they gain one automatic hit. And this is before dice are rolled. This is a very potent power. When we say something like you only gain one, or we don't say only, when we say you gain one hit, sometimes that doesn't sound like much. But keep in mind, most of the Storypath Ultra system revolves around enhancements and complications, and these things apply effectively on the tail end of difficulty, or on the tail end of the dice roll. To gain an enhancement, you need to score at least one hit on your roll, which means if you have a low dice pool, well, enhancements won't always come into play. When you gain an automatic hit before the pool is rolled, such as in this case, well, then we see a little more punch, because you can guarantee that your enhancements will trigger. The Outcast can also access a special form of movement as soon as they access their semi-liminal state. This could be flight, it could be extraordinary leaps, let's say they have goat's legs. They could be wall or ceiling crawlers with insectoid appendages. The Outcast becomes immune to the critical hit trick in their semi-liminal state, as their body defies regular biological functions and vulnerabilities. Therefore, it makes it a hell of a lot more difficult to injure you, incapacitate you. Indeed, for a great many combat tricks, in fact, I would suggest the fact that critical, which is one of the most go-to combat tricks I see, isn't available. It makes your character incredibly robust. Now, an Outcast can end the effect of slipping off the mask early as a reflexive action, and they don't need to bleed any additional curse dice to do so. When in a liminality, an Outcast is treated as having slipped off the mask and being in their semi-liminal form, and they don't need to bleed a curse die for that. Visually, they can appear in their semi-liminal state, their fully liminal state, or as humans, but it is up to them. They can do this for free. Now, what's more, in their raft of abilities, they have access to portals to the outside. If there is a liminality within the area in which the scene is taking place, an Outcast senses its presence, and for nothing, they know there is a liminal tear, there is a breach, there is a doorway, a portal. And for a difficulty 0 esoterica action, it's a simple action, they can determine exactly where the threshold can be found. Now, you may be thinking, what's the point in a difficulty 0 action? Well, like most difficulty 0 actions, this one has a complication. Let's talk difficulty 0 actions and complications briefly. You may wonder, what's the point? What's the point in an action I know I can pass? Well, difficulty tends to have a binary pass or fail to it. Complications are, as the name implies, complications, things that make your life more complicated or add to the narrative in an interesting but ultimately complicating way. Now, in this case, all you have to do is roll your dice. If you score no hits, congratulations, you still succeed. But you don't buy off the complication. It's only a minor one, so you only need one hit, which if you don't buy it off, alert something on the other side of this liminal tear as to your presence. For one hit, additionally, you can purchase a trick called Liminal Keyhole. You can determine the ritual instinctively required for crossing the liminality. This is a very important and very useful part of playing Outcasts, because accessing liminalities is something that, while it's going to be a general part of Curseborne, is a massive part of the Outcast journey. If your crew lacks an Outcast, you're going to find it a lot more difficult to access these liminal spaces. With the portal to the outside ability that all Outcasts come equipped with, basically it just means that when you come to try and determine where this threshold is with your esoterica action, as long as you get a couple of hits, one, you buy off the complication, therefore the thing on the other side, or things on the other side, don't know you're here, and two, you know how to get across. And upon determining the threshold, you can enter this outside by bleeding 2 curse dice, irrespective of the usual ritual circumstances or lockpicks. If you can't be bothered to perform the ritual, do the dance, paint lipstick on the mirror, or whatever it is you need to do, Outcasts have that ability. Outcasts are the only lineage that has that ability. Now, outcasts can only enter liminalities in the same area that they currently inhabit. That's quite important, such as an interstitial zone accessible through that doorway, a shattered space through that trapdoor, or a battleground for which they'd ordinarily have to coat themselves in blood and perform some kind of sacrifice while screaming. When leaving the liminality, the outcast emerges in the same place they entered, unless they found a separate portal once inside. And others can accompany the outcast to a liminality, but only if the outcast performs a ritual associated with this outside, which we've already covered, and bleeds an additional curse die for a group of up to 9 people. So don't worry, you don't need to bleed 1 curse die for every companion you're bringing along. Most crews are not going to exceed 9 individuals. So as long as you bleed 1 additional curse die, you can bring your crew with you. Unfortunately, sometimes that includes innocent bystanders, but that's up to the story guide to determine if any of them, if this would make the story stronger. Now, this part of the Outcast tapestry isn't known to a lot of people. I think I teased it on the Onyx Path Discord. I don't think we have announced it more widely, and I don't believe it was in the original manuscript, and it is their eternal punishment. You see, outcasts who take an action at the near-death injury level in an outside, so in a liminal space, somewhere that is not mortal, mundane Earth, find themselves reformed in their human guise and deposited back on the mundane Earth in a place they recognise. They will be fragile at the maimed injury level, and they'll be suffering the exhausted status effect, but they will be whole. They reappear in this way in the scene following their being taken out at near death. Outcasts are forever imprisoned. Death is no escape. Outcasts may want to die. They may have lived for hundreds of years, and they may want nothing more than to be slain. But each time they reach into the outside, each time they reach their makers, let's say, and their makers strike them down, they just spat straight back out again, and they have to live their lives. They cannot die in that way. Characters who experience this resurrection lose all their positive and negative bonds, reminding them that they are inhuman, they do not deserve to be loved, they are here to be punished. Now, outcasts who take an action at the near-death injury level in the mortal world suffer the taken out status effect in the same way, except they only die if a sentient being not from the outside willfully ends their life, typically inflicting the mortally wounded status effect. Disease, poison, age, self-inflicted injuries induce the taken out status effect, but do not kill the outcast. Therefore, they will awaken in the next scene fragile but alive again. An outcast cannot end their own existence. If they find a way of remaining conscious at near death, the taken out status effect is replaced with agony, or drained, or slowed, or stunned, or a similarly equivalent status effect. Now, that is maybe one of my favourite parts of the Outcasts. Narratively speaking, I can well imagine a Cain-like figure, if we want to get biblical, who wants nothing more than to die, but hasn't found the mortal yet who he can convince to kill him, or can overcome his defences. Oh, he could be slain by something that is not cursed or from the outside, but so far no one has been able to. Or maybe his pride won't allow himself to die in such a way, so he's been throwing himself off of buildings, stepping in front of trains. There's been a positive Groundhog Day montage, and just cannot end it. But none of this is the Outcast damnation. You see, just as every single accursed does, when an outcast runs down to 0 curse dice, they've bled their final one, which is typically something you do by choice. Curseborne is very much a game about choosing to succumb to these things. It's not a punishment for taking certain actions. It is essentially part of the deal. And this is a game very much about deals and pacts and things like that. You want that extra power? Great. Here's what comes with it. A damnation for an outcast is, well, they hold 0 curse dice. Everyone in the area with an unobstructed view of this outcast gains a momentary glimpse into their true, fully liminal state. Most onlookers will see fully liminal outcasts as abstract and utterly distressing. I mean, we're talking wheels and gears lined with eyes, feathery and bat-like wings, claws, horns, and this is just the mundane things you can explain with your mortal mind. Each family manifests differently. Some are going to be awe-inspiring, some are going to be terrifying, all of them are going to be hugely disconcerting and threatening. When a mortal catches this glimpse, they gain a status effect that varies depending on the outcast's major path. We've already spoken about damnations for 3 of the lineages, and you'll know that the damnation for each of them varies depending on what your major path is. You choose your major path at character creation. For an outcast, that could be Outcast, it could be Battleground Angel, Keeper of the Broken Vine, Munificent, League of Hidden Crossroads, Nephilim, Shimmerai, and of course, maybe at some point more. Now, once you do this, if this mortal who witnessed you, or any of the mortals who witnessed you, had a bond of 3 or higher with you, the rating reduces by 1, as this maddening sight disturbs them. If they had a bond of 2 or lower, it reduces to 0. You have shattered your bond with that individual. This is part of the challenge of playing Outcasts. Yes, you have this wonderful 1 automatic hit on influence actions, but outcasts really struggle to maintain these meaningful relationships with mortals because it is so easy for them to just freak everyone out around them. Now, you can resolve this situation, of course. Even though you may be able to reassure these people, there will be a lingering impact, trauma, nightmares, and so on. But to resolve this and prevent people from seeing your fully liminal state from here on out, you need to perform what is called a deed. Now, these deeds differ depending on what your major path happens to be, but it's essentially a form of penance, as if your outcast is trying to make good with God or the higher power that cast you down in the first place, or out, as it may well be. As I mentioned, the deed differs depending on what your family happens to be. Or rather what your major path happens to be, and in all cases pretty much it's going to result in an attitude shift for witnesses or the forging of a new bond with at least one character who you perform this deed with. It doesn't have to be a positive bond, I'll point that out. But let's give you some examples. So, for example, if you took the major path Outcast, witnesses gain the Crestfallen status effect. They see you and they experience such shame and disappointment to witness you for what you are. They no longer trust you. They no longer trust themselves. They feel betrayed. This is what Crestfallen is. They no longer feel confident in themselves. You have, in a way, humiliated them by revealing your true nature. Isn't that an odd and vicious way of revealing your true self and discovering what people think of you? Now, your deed in this case is to act to strengthen the bonds of a community, such as convincing the wealthiest members to invest in a youth project or arranging peace between warring gangs, that kind of thing. Now consider this. You're doing this with your fully liminal state. So the person who ends up enacting this is probably going to be doing so through a source of intimidation. Sure, you could call them while all this is going on, but a lot of the time you're going to want to resolve this rapidly, which means you're going to be causing danger and terror wherever you're going. Now, if it's Battleground Angels, witnesses gain the Frayed Temper status effect. Something in your true form sets people on edge, starts up something a little similar to a rage virus, terror in the streets. Those of you who have read Needful Things by Stephen King will know that by the end of that novel, the entire town of Castle Rock is basically at war with each other in the streets. The Battleground Angel, as he strides down the street, aflame, wings blazing, halo like the rings of Saturn around his head. Everyone behind him is suddenly losing it and going to war with each other. Now, your penitent deed is to humiliate a person or group subjugating one or more individuals weaker than them. This humiliation can come in any form, but works best when there are witnesses to it. Let's have a look at a couple more. The Shimmerai, witnesses gain the terrified status effect, perhaps the most overt status effect, in the sense that you are showing yourselves to be inhuman and humans are reacting in a completely natural way. They do not look at you with understanding, they are scared of you. If you can act to provide care for a person or group suffering from medical or psychological torment, not an easy feat if you've just terrified them, you can end the damnation and recover that curse die. Now let's look at, I'm going to go for League of the Hidden Crossroads. Sorry, Keepers of the Broken Vine. League of the Hidden Crossroads. Witnesses in this case gain the deprived status effect. You are basically draining the life from the people around you. If you act to freely, no charge, fulfill a contracted demand for a person or group in need, you will gain a curse die. Now, there are variants, of course, of the Keepers of the Broken Vine, the Munificents, the Nephilim as well, which you will become fully acquainted with once you have the whole manuscript in your hands. And as with all of our lineages, Damnations, while I talk about status effects and I talk about mechanical ways of resolving them, these are just suggestions. What we discovered when we released the initial manuscript via the Kickstarter was there was a lot of people who really enjoyed the narrative resolutions for Curseborne, the idea that they could resolve these things based on their own initiative, that the story guide had come up with ways of handling each outcast. And there were other people who needed these things codified. They needed the mechanical heft behind it. And so now, this manuscript, this book, has that mechanical heft, what I'm talking about now, but also has suggestions for doing it narratively too, what is called the exile curse. Essentially, you have been exiled, you've shown yourself to be an alien exile, and in doing so, you now need to make penance for it. This could be something like, helping someone, even traumatizing someone. It doesn't have to be a good deed, remember. These creatures are not necessarily holy or pleasant or morally true. They will do what they have to do to lock that true self away. But no outcast is going to be revealing that true self unless they really need to. You choose to bleed that final curse die. There's a couple of adversary abilities that drain curse dice, but that's about the only time that the story guide can compel it. The penitent deed, if you're handling it narratively, works best when acting to counter the effect the fully liminal state had on innocent witnesses. So, for example, if you are doing it narratively, an outcast who gives mortals paranoid nightmares might prove to them that it's right to trust some people. An outcast who afflicts witnesses with their deepest desires might enable them to practice these desires with a shame-free participant in a shame-free environment. A chimera who horrifies a child might show that kid how to be brave and strong. That kind of thing. You don't have to pin it all down with status effects. You can, by all means, resolve it with the story. And one thing I always like to make clear with Damnations, and this goes all the way back to when we were talking about the hungry and their need to feed, the default being feed in every session. Sometimes that's just not going to be practical, it's just not going to be interesting, and that's absolutely fine. What the story guide should consider is that doesn't go just kill your character, far from it. What it does is it provides a possible avenue for a complication later on. We either say narratively, you fed off camera, or you haven't fed. And then later on, there will be a time in the session where you say to the hungry, for example, you are really feeling like you need to satisfy your hunger now. Or, if they did feed off screen, you can see the person who you fed from earlier and they're looking at you with accusing eyes. In the case of the outcasts, if you don't want to have to handle the mechanical nuance of gaining a status effect when you manifest your liminal form, maybe this is the lucky time that there are no witnesses to it. Maybe. Or maybe this is the time that someone witnesses you and they have no reaction at all. Now that is an interesting effect. That is a story beat that you can then follow up. So there's lots of ways you can do this. Last thing I'll cover with the Outcast Damnations is their Torments. All lineages come with Torments. Of course, you have Torments that are personal, but you have a Torment that is tied to being accursed as well. The 3 suggested in the Curseborne core book are: you can have higher thoughts. A character with this torment finds the needs and concerns of mundane humanity wearisome, choosing to use her friends and colleagues as pawns or assets in the grander game against the Archons. When she succumbs to this torment, always by player choice, she becomes self-absorbed, ignores social obligations, and generally treats her family and friends like dirt. So that's something to do if you like the lone wolf kind of character. Remember, when you succumb to your torment, you gain a curse die or a momentum, and of course, if it's a disadvantage to the entire group, both. You can take like flies to shit, which is my favourite one. The outcasts shouldn't be here. They're far from alone in that regard. A character with this torment is like honey to the taste buds of the unnatural, summoning monsters closer to do harm. When the character gives in to this torment, a shiver adversary, such as a cultist, host worms, hunting beasts, imps, monster traps, something like that, will appear in the area. They're not obliged to make their presence known, but just by you being present, things will seep in through the liminalities. Finally, we have Show of Force. The blood of the Archons screams to be used. A character with this torment knows she's no mere mortal. When she gives into this torment, she must use the strongest effects available to her to solve her problems, even if they're not the right tools for the job, and especially if they will cause collateral damage. So this may be the time when you choose to go fully liminal, just because you took Show of Force as your torment. So there's lots of really fun ways to play Outcasts. As I say, they are one of my favourite lineages. They may be the favourite, I don't know. I probably shouldn't pick one above all others. But I find that their mechanical complexity is less than some of the other lineages. That their themes are very strong. That they work superbly within that sort of Curseborne tableau that we're setting up with the core book. And I hope you like them too. Next week, we will have another character creation video, so get your character ideas in the video description below, not the video description, in the comments below. I will post a link to the Curseborne backer kit, so you can pre-order the book if you haven't already, in the video description below. But yes, it will be another live character creation video, so I need your ideas, which means you need to post them in the comments. If you have an idea you want to see put onto a character sheet, I will take you through the character creation process. You'll learn a little more about the game. We'll get to talk about all this fun stuff, and we will do it live at approximately 4 PM BST over on this YouTube channel. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.